Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Research in Focus event. In a very, I know, maybe busy Wednesday, a very busy month for everybody. So today we welcome two speakers, two excellent faculties, Jennifer Long from Master of Education and Afarin Rajaei from MACP, Master of Art in Counseling Psychology. Afrin, you want to come first? I will start sharing the screen now.
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Let me share my screen with you. So hopefully you see my screen, right? Yeah, okay, awesome. So thank you for this opportunity and conversation. Today I'm going to talk about cinema therapy research and publication mentorship program, which I've been doing like in the past year at the Yorkville. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about it with you all. So I'm a course lead in the MACP program, and I have the opportunity to apply for the SSAF funding last year and got the funding for this mentorship program, which I'm going to talk about more in the next few minutes. So before I start, just a huge special thanks to SSAF funding at the Yorkville, because this program would have not been possible without the generous support of Yorkville University and the SSAF funding. So me and the students, we really appreciate this opportunity. So actually, the thought of applying for this grant came from a keen interest of my personal experience. So as you see, English, like I have accent, English is my second language, and when I started graduate school in the US, I like publication was just this huge scary thing to me. It was very intimidating, and at that time, I thought that because English is my second language, I probably am going to have a very hard time with publication. And later on, fast forward, I was in a PhD program and I was able to publish like 7 articles. And then when I became a professor and mentor, because of my past experience, one of the goals that I've always had is to make like academic writing and publication a little bit easier or smoother for students. So when I started like some years ago, when I wanted to work with the students, I thought that for the first experience with publication, like a book review could be an amazing one because it's short, it's like 2-3 pages, and it's helpful to students. And then later on, I'm a huge fan of like cinema and TV series, movies. Later on, I came to this conclusion that working on cinema therapy, meaning like choosing a movie or TV series and look at it from a clinical perspective and aspects, a layer, right, that would have clinical implications, it would be really interesting and helpful. It's very relatable. It's still scientific and academic because you use qualitative research and narrative inquiry in your work. And it would be interesting to students because, first of all, again, like it's a relatable work. You don't need to go through like ethic board, like, IRB or REB in Canada. And at the same time, again, like you have the opportunity to work on something scientific and interesting. So the purpose of this whole program was to create an innovative mentorship model for graduate students in designing, conducting, writing, and publishing qualitative research using cinema therapy as both method and lens. So the target group that we have was Yorkville University counseling psychology students seeking to develop research competencies and publication experience. And so after I got the grant, we had a survey to send to students. We had 100 applicants, and this 500 applicants obviously completed the survey. And then after that, based on the applications, I selected some students and I conducted interview with them. So at the end of the day, we had 5 students who were selected for this training and one-on-one mentorship opportunity through publication. So I just explained this, that we had the survey, we have the selection interviews, we have the comprehensive mentorship. So in the mentorship, it was one-on-one guidance covering research design, narrative inquiry, which was the methodology for our research, And we use obviously qualitative methods. We use cinema therapy framework application, and we followed like academic writing guidelines and APA 7 and publication strategies. So throughout this process, our goal was at the end of the day, we will have papers that they could go. I hear someone, papers that could go under peer review process and review. And then at the end of the day, we can have presentations at conferences and also publications. So with these 5 students, I worked one-on-one. So at the end of the day, we had 5 papers. And in our mentorship, we had different conversations about, again, like academic writing, cinema therapy, methodology, and all of that. So the first question that comes to mind from your perspective might be, why cinema therapy and what is cinema therapy? So cinema therapy is a therapeutic approach that uses films, TV series, and other visual medias as a catalyst for reflection, emotional process, and psychological insights. So when I work with the students in any sort of like mental health fields, one of the things that I always tell my students is I usually recommend that they either need to read novels or they need to watch TV series, movies. And why is that? Because I think that in the clinical world, when at the end of the day, you're going to work with clients and families, it's really one of the most important skills that you're going to have is empathy and understanding. And since each of us as human beings, we only live one life, like our lives, we don't get a chance to have multiple experiences, right, in life. It's really important to have an opportunity to hear alternative stories. And those alternative stories happen in novels and TV series and movies. So I always tell my students that you should do one of either of these things, like novels or TV series and movies. And so that's one reason that I think that cinema therapy is really helpful. In academic writing and publication and research, as I mentioned, I think that specifically for the beginning of your journey, cinema therapy could be really helpful because it's relatable. It's not as intimidating as, the other research studies that we do with empirical data, like interviewing people or, quantitative, like survey, all those different things. It is still, it's scientific because you're using qualitative method, you're using narrative inquiry. The only difference is like the stories that you're going to deal with is the stories in the movie or TV series. So again, like I feel like cinema therapy serves multiple functions. So it develops cultural competence, it enhances empathy and perspective taking, it helps with complex theoretical concepts through narrative, creates opportunities for supervised self-reflections. Films become text through which we can examine systemic patterns, identity formation, trauma responses, and therapeutic changes. For this mentorship and the papers that we have, the methodology was narrative inquiry framework. So it's like we deal with the stories in movies and TV series, and that's why we chose that narrative inquiry. So we had media selection. So with each student, like we had a conversation and we choose a TV series or movie, which was a common interest. And, we had a specific angle that we wanted to look at that movie from. We did thematic analysis, obviously, in our analysis. In a moment, I'll share with you the movies and the TV series and the themes that we found. And we also worked on the scholarly writing and academic writing with the students. I work with them, with the students. So the TV series and movies that we chose, so as I mentioned, I work with 5 students. So maybe you have watched some of these options here. So the first one was Adolescence, then Baby Reindeer, then Ted Lasso, then Succession, and then everything at the same time, at the same place, same time. That's a long TV movie name. So each project demonstrates sophisticated integration of narrative inquiry, systemic perspective, and cultural analysis. So the status of the projects that we had, the first one, Thoughts to Hate, Longing to Belong, which is about a Netflix adolescence TV show. The themes that we found and we talked about were misogyny, masculinity, adolescence, and digital radicalization. And it's already published in the Family Journal. The next choice, Believe in Change, which was about Ted Lasso, and the themes that we found was about redefining masculinity, leadership, emotional intelligence, and relationships. And the paper is currently under review in International Journal of Systemic Therapy. The next one is Money Can't Heal. Let me remove this from here to here because I cannot read my screen. Oh, sorry, I stopped sharing, huh? Let me share again. Okay. So Money Can't Heal, and by healing, it's about succession, and the themes was trauma, identity, intergenerational trauma, and all of that. It's already published in the American Journal of Family Therapy. The next choice that we had, or the next paper, was The Weight of True Stories. It was about the TV series Baby Reindeer. So the themes that we talked about was trauma bonding and ethical storytelling. It's currently under review in the Journal of Feminist Family Therapy. Which, by the way, when we submit that paper in the journal, as you see the name of the journal, the editor was really excited about the paper. So the last one was A Multiverse of Perspective, which was about the movie Everything Everywhere all at Once. And we talked about intergenerational trauma, LGBTQ plus acceptance, and immigrant family healing. And this one is also published in the Family Journal. So I already feel very lucky because we started this project back in January, and then we finished the project by May, and then we submitted them in journals. And right now, as you see, 3 of them are published already, and 2 of them are under review. So main findings across studies, if I just want to talk about that in general, would be the first one, films as safe, simple spaces. So across all projects, cinema provided a non-threatening medium for exploring difficult topics such as trauma, abuse, toxic masculinity, and family conflict. The next one would be deep cultural and systemic analysis. So with the narrative inquiry, like we were able to kind of like explore how all these different themes and, gender, race, and class intersect within film narratives. So that was interesting. Next one was reflexivity and positionality, which for the students, these are like master's students. So it was very new. So students was able to talk about their positionality and how their own experience, perspective, position would impact their reflection and analysis of the data, which again, like in this case, is movie and TV series, and also like intersectionality, power, and identity. So the findings across like the different papers, we all like focus on those different social factors because they are really important. We have a short time here. It's only 20 minutes. So I just thought that I would briefly tell you the themes that we find in each of these papers. So in Ted Lasso, Believe in Change, Ted Lasso and the Power of Narrative in Therapy, the key themes and findings were redefinition of masculinity through emotional expression, leadership rooted in emotional intelligence and empathy, and role of relationship in personal transformation. And as I mentioned before, it's currently under review. For the next one, which is The Weight of True Stories, a narrative inquiry into trauma and power in Baby Reindeer, the main themes were narrating trauma and identity, power, coercion, and abuse dynamics, systemic and social responses to male victims, trauma, intimacy, and healing, intersectionality of trauma, and social identity. And as I mentioned, it's currently under review in the Journal of Feminist Family Therapy. Next one, which is a multiverse of perspective, cinematherapy, cultural identity, and family healing, which is published now. So the themes that we found was intergenerational trauma and emotional dissociation, cultural expectation versus individual identity, LGBTQ plus acceptance, and familial healing, the multiverse as therapeutic metaphor. And if you're interested, again, like because our time is short, for the ones that are published, you're more than welcome to go and, read them fully and let me know if you have any questions and feedback. Next one, Thought to Hate, Longing to Belong, Misogyny, and the Making of Masculinity. So the themes that we found was about this digital misogyny and the normalization of hate, peer dynamics and emotional isolation, longing for belonging and radicalization, therapeutic and systemic interventions. Next, Money Can't Buy Healing, Exploring Succession's Portfolio of Trauma, Identity, and Family Systems. The key themes and findings included intergenerational trauma and family systems, narrative identity and coping strategies, gender roles and power dynamics, privilege, control, and emotional detachment, which is also published. So the outcomes and achievements of this mentorship program, 5 papers, 3 of them published, 2 under review, 100% completion. But I think that more important than numbers, I think the whole experience was really interesting to me and to the student based on the conversations that I had with them. The fact that I saw them from the beginning, like so scared of publication, saying like, I don't know much about like publication, through like this 5 months that we work with each other intensively, like through many hours, and they learn about academic writing, they learn about methodology, they learn about cinema therapy, and actually the fact that they saw their name in print now published, that whole experience to me, it's been really a privilege and interesting. So there were also some challenges. So some of the challenges that we had was like coordinating timelines with a student's schedule. Everyone is busy, like they are graduate students. So that was something that we worked on it. The other thing was because of some of these TV series and movies and the themes that we found and we worked on, they were heavy emotionally. So we also had conversations about that and recommendation to, go to therapy and having self-reflection, peer consultation, all of that. And also navigating through the peer review process. Some of these students, like when we submitted the paper, like the next week, they're like, what happened? Is it published? Is it not published? And they were not aware of the whole process of like, you need to wait, you get feedback, you get revisions. If you get revisions and then you work on it and then you submit again. So that whole learning process was also interesting and sometimes challenging to students. Some of the next steps for me and just suggestion that I have in mind is like following up on publications, cohort expansions, if I had a chance in the future to have this mentorship program again. Cross-university collaboration would be really interesting. And if in the future there would be any chance to have some sort of curriculum integration with this idea of having mentorship. This is not me bragging. This is just what makes me happy. So these are the quotes from some of my students. One of them said, "You have inspired me to do a PhD in equity, diversity, and social justice when my son is a little bit older." And the other one said, basically, this experience made her like pursuing a PhD now because she realized that it is possible to actually work on research and have publications, and it's not that scary as she thought before. So the day that I received these comments, it just made my day, and I feel like the mentorship program did its purpose. And again, like as a closing and acknowledgement, I just want to say again, like we have me and the students, we have deep gratitude for the SSAF funding, Yorkville University, and also like I have deep gratitude for the students who participated in this mentorship program and work with me. It just takes a lot of curiosity, dedication, vulnerability, and we are happy that we contributed to the literature with our work and projects. So I think I'm on time. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Afarin. I found it is a very interesting project, and I would like to congratulations on a very successful SSAF project with like wonderful outcomes. 3 out of 5 papers published. I myself have a few questions for this one, but we wait until our question and answer. So thank you. And Jennifer, I believe you are already here. And then I mark you as the presenter. So can you try sharing the screen now? Great.
Thanks. And thanks very much, Afarin, very much for going first. I really appreciate that. And my gratitude again to Thu for organizing this, and for everyone. Again, I apologize. I think I have competing teams. As you can see from the first slide here, is that I work for both, I work for 2 organizations. I work full-time for MacEwan University in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I, of course, also worked for the Yorkville University. And so I think that's what was really kind of holding me up and being able to join here today. So can everyone hear me? All right? Great. Okay. So I'm going to begin this presentation with an ethnographic vignette, which is typical of my home discipline in anthropology. Today, as you can see, I'm talking about newcomer and host community disillusionment in Canadian resettlement. Okay, so the Free Store for Ukrainian Newcomers is situated directly behind MacEwan University, where I work full-time in downtown Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Gifted to a local Edmontonian with Ukrainian descent, the store is bursting at the seams with clothing, household goods, and foodstuffs. As I walk through the barred doors, the municipality has long neglected their obligations to support houseless and homeless individuals, closing shelters and safe injection sites, leading to increase in petty crime and police presence. So that's why there's these barred doors. And as I walk through these doors, I'm greeted by one woman in Ukrainian and another in English. I tell them I'm looking for Svetlana, and they motion me to walk through the store and up to the second floor. As you can see, these are the stairs that are painted as I walk up these stairs. And apparently I've come through the donation drop-off entrance. So I walk down the pathway of the yet-to-be sorted items and through a hastily assembled bedsheet curtain, dividing the drop-off center from the store. There I met with a sight of tens of people sifting through items and speaking Ukrainian. The walls are painted with its colorful murals and Ukrainian motifs and depictions of Ukraine at war and their triumph over Russia. There are Ukrainian flags and a large painting of a golden-haired angel and a crucifix. I walk up to the second floor where I meet Svetlana, who is one of the Ukrainian newcomers who is co-managing the Free Store. And I'm explaining my research to her when Janice shows up. Janice is a third-generation Ukrainian Edmontonian whom I'm partnered with for this research. And it's through Janice's advocacy that the Free Store exists in a building donated by my university, MacEwan University, in a rent-free space. Janice begins to give me a tour of the space and outlining the projects that led up to this space, dropping names with what she tells me are famous people like local politicians and my university's president that have come to visit before me. Now, I've worked in the field of anthropology, exploring immigration and resettlement since 2012, and I've never been so struck by the sheer volume of resources consolidated into one community member's advocacy. This feeling of surprise would stick with me throughout this research. And I hope you'll forgive me. It's a bit what I'll be presenting today. I have to move between, I only have one screen and I have to move between it because I'm currently on field work in Cold Lake, Alberta. So I'm using kind of I'm a bit organizing around. If anyone kind of loses the thread or if I've lost the thread, please let me know. So what am I talking about today? What's the context behind it? Well, in response to the 2022 full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Canadian government created an unprecedented visa called the Q8, which is the Canadian-Ukrainian Emergency Assistance Travel Program. This program allows Ukrainian nationals from anywhere in the world to apply for a visa and come to Canada. Upon arrival, these newcomers, who are not considered refugees, so this is the unique nature of it as well, received $3,000. Alberta took 70,000, of the 300,000 Ukrainians who arrived in Canada, and 25,000 of those came to Edmonton. This is significant given Edmonton's total population of 1 million people and as a medium-sized city and resettlement infrastructure. Alberta has previously received previous waves of Ukrainian immigration since the late 1800s, when the federal government was settling the western provinces and forcibly removing Indigenous peoples from their lands. When Q8 was announced, the Minister of Immigration at that time said, quote, "We hope the local Ukrainian community will help resettle and integrate these Ukrainian newcomers," end quote. As sociologist Jennifer Heinemann has noted, this is unprecedented, as was the community-led response. It turns out that the community was necessary because typical settlement providers, your United Way and other things like this, had to apply for new funding, which took months, up to 6 to 8 months, to receive that funding back. So this left a significant resource and support gap. And as one Ukrainian Edmontonian put it from my interviews, quote, "Ukrainian newcomers were showing up at the airport at all times of night, and there was no one there to meet them." So in this presentation, I described the findings from qualitative research conducted from February to July 2024, including participant observation, focus groups with about 25 people who are Edmontonian Ukrainians, and life history interviews with Ukrainian newcomers, about 15 of those. This data reveals that recent Ukrainian newcomers have different ideas about resettlement than third and fourth generation Ukrainian Edmontonians, actively supporting them. While newcomers navigate triumphs, losses, and disillusionment, the Ukrainian Edmontonian diaspora reveals preconceived notion of certain Canadian ways of integrating that also highlight the role of whiteness when conceptualizing who is the right kind of migrant in Canada and its imagined multicultural nation. Acknowledging the specificity of immigration as a research topic, I'm going to first briefly describe Canada's immigration system here today and some of academics' critiques of its shortcomings. I'll then provide a quick overview of how Ukrainian newcomers experienced coming to Canada, followed by the experiences of resettlement from the perspective of the Ukrainian diaspora in Edmonton. That is, those individuals who are generally third to fifth generation Ukrainians. So here's a simplified overview of Canada's immigration system. It's called the Express Entry System. And if I could, give a quick overview of what a tagline about what it's like to immigrate to Canada. Well, first off, it's expensive due to its geography and also its high cost of living. Canada positions itself as a multicultural paradise enshrined in law. We have a Multicultural Act, and its colonial roots and hundreds of Indigenous nations shape up a complex ethnic identity on the national level. So this image of Canada's multiculturalism has bolstered support for immigration among Canadians or individuals already living here, although attitudes towards immigration have recently shifted towards the negative. Indeed, following the murder of George Floyd, a Black American father, at the hands of police in 2020, many of Canada's governing bodies, that is, the federal, provincial, municipal governments, large organizations, and nonprofits, conducted research on the continued role of racism, which include anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and homophobia across our systems and within our institutions to understand how individuals living within Canada are experiencing the role of multiculturalism today. And so, although many Canadians like to think that they're better than their neighbors to the south, the unwavering belief in the moral fortitude of their multicultural approach to difference has actually left many of those living in Canada blinkered to the realities of Canada's continued colonization and racial capitalism at work. So the largest group of newcomers to come to Canada are economic migrants who are essentially asked to submit a resume to Canada's virtual immigration portal. Once approved as a viable applicant, employers can select specific applicants for a job and/or the government can select a subset of applicants who have sufficient education, language ability, and money in the bank to come to Canada. Also, local familial ties will help there. While this system prioritizes highly educated applicants, those newcomers coming to Canada without an offer of employment often have great difficulty finding work due to the issues with professional credential recognition, racism, among other issues. Highly skilled newcomers often find themselves working in or lower skilled jobs in a gig economy and generally in positions that existing Canadians don't want and often outside their skill set. So anthropologist Eva Mackey argues that Canadian multiculturalism is in fact what it does is it manages cultural, ethnic, and political difference rather than celebrates it. Similarly, Lebanese-Australian anthropologist Ghassan Hage has coined the term, quote, white multiculturalism, end quote, to articulate the ways in which state multicultural immigration systems methodically work to center white citizens as the true national subjects while relegating others to the periphery. One means by which this is achieved is through the narrative of productive diversity, which you see defined here on the slide, which Hage defines as the, quote, cultural and economic exploitation of ethnicity to yield a kind of ethnic surplus value. This narrative believes that the white governmental imaginary that perceives ethnic minorities as a problem in the first place means that they're a problem if they're unproductive, so they have to be working in these jobs that other Canadians don't want. So immigrants are famed as valuable either for their economic contribution or for their cultural performance through food, dress, and dance. And both Hage and MACP document how multiculturalism limits the ability for these newer Canadians to express their political opinions or consolidate their power among the existing community. So today, what I'd like to do is explore newcomers' disillusionment during their resettlement experience. Indeed, while all newcomers, and this would be my research assistant, who was an undergraduate international student from Ukraine, and I spoke with, so their experiences, when we spoke with them, they were very grateful to have a secure and safe place in what they described as, quote, a land of opportunity. Many faced unforeseen obstacles, however, once they arrived here, which resulted in such disillusionment. Anna, for example, who's some of the quotes you see here, shared her worry about her children losing progress due to the inaccessible activities. Her 14-year-old daughter had competed as a high-level gymnast in Ukraine, but the gymnastics board in Canada ruled that only permanent residents, which they are not, can compete in local events. Anna also spoke, as did others, about the burdensome nature of Canada's bureaucracy, the endless forms and long wait lists for responses. She also described her general loneliness, shaped by what she saw as Canada's coldness and its lack of humor. This lack of connection with Edmontonians was echoed by others. And after a year in Canada, Lilia, sorry, I moved my place here. Lilia said she was at her lowest point. Though initially relieved to be somewhere safe with her kids, her family now struggled to find belonging, connection, and meaningful work. Lilia, who is a trained lawyer in Ukraine, was exploring how she could afford going back to school for paralegal training. Having passed her one-year mark, she missed the cutoff for many institutions that had offered free education for Ukrainians because we were gathering this information in 2024. Returning to Anna, the first person I was speaking about, she also spoke about the crushing expense of living in Edmonton. She noted the impossibility of surviving there without a two-household income. As you can see on the slide, she felt confusion due to the back and forth questioning of whether to stay in Canada or return home, as her mother had done. And of course, home is still a place of war. So almost all newcomers we spoke with had noted financial struggles, like Tatiana, who spoke about barely breaking even, or Jane, who couldn't find affordable housing, or Lesia and Tatiana, who had to stay home to care for the children because daycare was simply too expensive. Altogether, these various facets, financial burden, bureaucracy, and a lack of credential recognition, built a sense of social isolation and confusion about the next step. In 15 life history interviews collected by my research assistant, Ukrainian international student Sofia Budianska, and I, there was a laundry list of lacking resources and services for newcomers. This revealed not just a state of the integration system, but also the impact of flooding it and additional requests and the importance of community members and organizations stepping up to meet the needs. And it's here where I'm going to turn now to feelings of disillusionment among Edmontonians, the Ukrainian diaspora, who had been here for 3 to 5 generations, who supported this resettlement, this latest resettlement. How am I doing for time through? Okay. Maybe 7 minutes
I think
left or so?
Yeah, 5 more minutes left.
Okay. I will go quick. So, although there are 100 Ukrainian organizations in Edmonton, no kidding, there's a lot. I was associated with one pop-up group described by participants as a space of refuge. The Free Store, which I mentioned in the very beginning in the vignette, was a place for newcomers to meet, share information, and connect with Edmontonians wanting help. Edmonton's Ukrainian diaspora gave their time and money in ways to support newcomer resettlement and integration. Respondents spoke about picking up arrivals from the airport, driving them to appointments, acting as translators, helping with applications, hosting families, donating professional expertise, co-signing bank loans, and sourcing essentials like furniture and food. They also supported the Ukrainian war effort directly. For example, when they organized aid, sourced medical equipment, arranged flights, fundraised, cooked, crafted, and lobbied through media campaigns. These efforts ranged from large scale to very local, and they grew organically through Edmontonians' existing community networks. What stood out to me was how supporting resettlement, often at great personal cost, was linked to ethnic pride. Daria, for example, said, "It's in our blood to wear our love on our sleeve for being Ukrainian, for Ukraine, and for the Ukrainian culture." Others like Taras and Karen felt, quote, obligated as Edmontonians with Ukrainian heritage, while Meloria simply said that she was raised to help others. Unsurprisingly, many described their support as if it was an inherited biological trait. Often these individuals had grown up in Alberta and were part of a Ukrainian organization or a church or a dance troupe or a language program that had been long building networks that were now leveraged to support newcomers, international relations scholars, what international relations scholar Maria Koinova would call diaspora entrepreneurs. That is, those who informally or formally mobilized on behalf of their community, often deepening reflections on ethnic and national identity in a local space. So, although we had this strong sense of embeddedness, for some Ukrainian diaspora members, it wasn't shared uniformly across the community. Volunteers like Sherilyn, who created a Facebook group that hosted Ukrainian families in Edmonton, which grew to 30,000 followers, the city's largest, she felt outside the spiderweb of Ukrainian Edmontonians network. Sherilyn had made a page to help with Canadians to host newcomers, not just Ukrainian Canadians, the specific community, but all Edmontonians. Because after she had reached out to one of Edmonton's largest organizations, she had never heard back. Daniel, you can see more about what she had mentioned here. I'll let you read it yourselves. Daniel was another person. He was a second-generation Ukrainian who had moved from another province, and he echoed the same sense of exclusion. He said, quote, "I never feel like I'm doing enough. I want to try to help, but this group's already doing this and that group's doing that. When I asked them if I could collaborate on my projects, they said, no, we're busy doing this. And I actually found I can get more support from non-Ukrainians by educating other Ukrainians about what's going on." Here we see what anthropologist Cindy Horst called multi-sided embeddedness, which is defined as the ways individuals build belonging across multiple communities through their advocacy. Horst found that this kind of layered identity also shapes civic engagement. And I argue that for these diaspora entrepreneurs, their embeddedness wasn't necessarily in Edmonton's Ukrainian diaspora, but in Ukraine itself. This came through most clearly when participants spoke about helping distant relatives still in Ukraine. So during the focus groups that I held with the diaspora members, I asked Edmontonians their emotions that they experienced while supporting newcomers. Many described feelings of joy, seeing what they thought is considered progress, and relief at being able to help after feeling so helpless once they heard that the invasion had begun in 2022. Others expressed deep sadness about the war and terror facing Ukrainians whom they felt this affinity with. These emotions were raw. Participants cried in each of our 4 out of 5 focus groups. And what struck me was how often support was tied to this sense of deservingness, especially linked to Ukrainian newcomers' work ethic. So Sonia said, quote, "We have one fellow who hired quite a few Ukrainians, and he said, I want to get rid of all my Canadian employees because they don't work. These guys, these Ukrainians, work." Participants repeatedly emphasized this hard work ethic, linking it to Edmonton's benefit, a new generation of Ukrainians contributing through what, drawing on my theoretical framework, we can call productive diversity. Their usefulness was equated to hard work, earnings, and paying taxes to support the existing community and nation. This sentiment appeared to contrast with the earlier waves of refugees, especially those arriving after Crimea's annexation in 2014, who were often perceived as less willing to support the newcomers, most recently in 2022 and beyond, themselves, and in addition to other refugees from earlier conversations, which were referring to both refugees from Syria and Afghanistan. Others, like Karen, for example, again, whom you can see here, spoke of the importance of this new influx for rebuilding Ukrainian identity in Edmonton. Karen said these newcomers would enrich the city, language that echoes Ghassan Hage's idea of productive diversity, where cultural value is measured by one contribution to the dominant community. She said, too, linked cultural enrichment to hard work. So deservingness, as we can see here, also shaped ideas about who should be allowed to receive help. Participants told stories of so-called opportunists, some Edmontonians, but mostly newcomers, who took advantage of the Kuwait program, for nefarious means. Marilyn, for example, spoke of Ukrainians arriving for a few weeks, collecting their $3,000 landing bonus, and then returning to Ukraine or using the money to buy 60-inch TVs. Taras, who you see here, described rich Ukrainians avoiding the war as something he disagreed with. Here we see familiar tropes. Deserving newcomers are poor, hardworking, grateful, and they are expected to be grateful for the charity and benevolence afforded to them by the state, or rather here by the community. Okay, this is my last slide. Okay, so just briefly here, what you see is one of the creative outputs I created to share this information with students at my home full-time university in Edmonton at MacEwan. This timeline was printed off and hung in the library during MacEwan's 2024 Ukraine Week. This timeline is a compilation of Ukrainian newcomers' typical experiences of arriving in Edmonton. And when this poster was on display in the library, we posted student researchers in front of it and asked passersby, this was students, faculty, staff, and visitors, to read the timeline and engage with it using post-it notes and other design-related materials to share whether this experience matched their own immigration experiences. If they didn't have a personal immigration experience, they were asked to share their own sense of belonging. And then what they would do is attach it to different parts. Again, it was a very large poster, so they could attach it in whatever places they felt like they connected to the most. So in conclusion of this presentation, over the last 20 minutes, I explored the different and sometimes conflicting ways Ukrainian newcomers and members of the Edmontonian Ukrainian diaspora experienced resettlement. Newcomers often arrive expecting safety and opportunity, only to face bureaucracy, financial precarity, and social isolation. Meanwhile, diaspora entrepreneurs mobilize resources, often at personal cost, driven by pride, obligation, and transnational ties to Ukraine. These tensions reveal the limits of Canada's multicultural model, which promises inclusion but operates through whiteness and settler colonialism. While Ukrainian newcomers benefit from racial proximity to whiteness and are often seen as the right kind of migrant, this does not shield them from the disillusionment when structural barriers arise, nor does it ensure alignment between diaspora supporters and those they hope to help. The Free Store illustrates both the potential limits of community resettlement. While it filled critical gaps left by the state, it also exposed assumptions about deservingness, integration, and the moral economy of help. So in closing, the comparison I presented here is not just between newcomers and diaspora, but between ideals and realities, between the inclusion and management, between inclusion and management, and between imagined futures and their lived experiences. It is in these spaces of dissonance that anthropology helps us understand how migration, racial capitalism, and community solidarities shape what it means to belong again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your research. It looks like a very complicated and longitudinal research. So we have about 16 minutes left for question and answer. I see one question in the box, so I will read that one for, I think, Afarin. Could you talk about the time frame of the project and how you targeted publications to which you submitted articles?
Sure. So I applied for the SSAF funding in 2024, like I think last year this time. And then when
December
I got it,
2024, yeah.
Yes. And then I think when we got it, we started the project. We started talking about like the survey, how we want to recruit students in January. We send out the survey in January, so it starts then. And then I went through the process, like interviews with the students, choosing 5 students, and then we start the project right in February. So we started in February, we finished the projects in May, and then after that we started like finding journals and homes for the publications. So we submit the 5 papers in 5 different journals, and then right now it's October. So some of them got published and some of them are still under review.
Teresa, do you want to ask more?
No, that was really helpful in terms of the answer to my question there about publications and sort of the time frame of the project. But I just realized my camera's off. Sorry, here I am. Hi. So no, that was very helpful. I guess the other thing I'd say is I apologize to everybody for writing like an essay in the chat, but I did not actually know that this presentation was going to be about Ukrainians. And this is a major area of research for me, as well as being Ukrainian. So so I started watching the topic and I got a little triggered because of my own history and, and my knowledge of, from an insider perspective of what's going on in the donation community and everything that's happening with the free store and all of that kind of stuff, right? So I apologize for writing the essay in the chat, but I mean, it's an important topic. And I think I've said everything I had to say in the chat. But I think a lot of the thing with Ukrainians in Canada is that most people really don't understand their history. And even Ukrainians don't always understand their own history, right? And there's a lot of kind of mythology around the history of Ukrainians in Canada with regard to kind of like, I mean, I'm not going to deny that Ukrainians have a strong work ethic, because they certainly do. Otherwise, they certainly wouldn't have survived in this country. A lot of their survival also was credited to interactions with local people like First Nations. Like when my family first moved here, they lived in a hole dug in a hill, right? On a homestead. A lot of people think that land was given to them for free, which it wasn't. There's just a lot of complicated things, and Ukrainians weren't really considered white people when they came to Canada, and they were considered morally problematic. And there's things about this in Hansard, in the federal government's records, in newspaper articles, all kinds of stuff like that. So anyway, I think I've said in the chat what I wanted to say, but it's a very complicated history. And Ukrainians, when they first came to Canada, also were not known as Ukrainians. Some of them identified as Ukrainians, but also they were more of a kind of tribal, if I could describe it that way, is the best way Canadians might understand it, sort of cultural groupings that were regional rather than this sort of nationalistic identity, which has changed considerably over the last 100 years in Canada. I think I've said enough, but thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for sharing your ideas. I see the first hand from Nadeep.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Lee. I've got a couple of questions. Those were very interesting pieces of research. So, Afarin, I do come from psychology as well, and I was wondering if we should have this discussion about how to integrate what you did as a research into the curriculum, because you spoke about that in the last slide. I think it's quite a conversation worth having, because whenever it comes to integrating a traumatic material, there is this huge controversy about the triggering material that it could be. So as much as it is important to really not infantilize the student and have them get into touch with this traumatic material, it's also important how to choose the traumatic material. So I'm sure you are having this experience, because you engage with that. So what's your advice on that? I mean, what's your take on the faculty coming together to identify, integration of these traumatic film themes into the reflection at all levels? I mean, we've got BBA courses, we've got film studies, we also got MACP. So what do you say to that? And before I actually stop, wording my question, I would really want to appreciate that you have scaffolded the students, you have created that path for them, which you did not have. And that's worth appreciation, because that's a common experience for so many people. I also have a question for Jennifer, because Jennifer, that happens to be my experience too, because I was this immigrant once. And I've got a question for you as well, but I'll have Afarin respond first. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your question and comment. I really appreciate it. And I think you raised a great question. I think, so at least like the way that I look at it, it's different when it's a kind of like voluntarily project versus like when it's like a required, like if it's a part of the course or required kind of like component for students. And I think that with the required part, sometimes we need to be more careful, because there is no conversation. There's this course that they need to take, they have to take, right? This project, because it was like voluntarily, we had the conversation. So it actually happened that with one of the, it was actually the rain, I don't know if you watched the Baby Reindeer, but when we chose that TV series and we talked about it, one of the students said, actually, this is like too much for me, not because of personal experience, because of professional experience that I've worked in this setting before, blah, blah, blah. And we had a conversation about that. And then I recommend the students, like all these different like kind of like suggestion? Do you want like to go like we talked about, like she mentioned therapy, like we talked about journaling, all of that. And actually what I suggested to her was like taking the space, like do not like think about this like for 2 or 3 weeks, and just have the space and then come back to it, and then with a refreshed mind, and then we can have another conversation. And actually when she did that, and then she came back, and like we kind of like distributed the work differently, she was very willing to work on the project. But obviously there was no obligation in taking any of this if it was too much exposure. And but I think that you raised a great point. If it's part of the kind of like obligated or required curriculum, I think our thoughtfulness and carefulness should be different, because the students don't have a choice in choosing that. So
Yeah,
I try to be brief in my answer because I'm just mindful of time.
no, it's very much what I was looking forward to. So I think I'll just follow up on you about the guidelines we might actually come up with, because that's something that's sensational, important. It has to find a place in the classroom. Jennifer, I'll very quickly ask this because it's 12 noon, almost 12 noon on my side. I think we've got very less time. So yeah, maybe I'll follow up later with you, Jennifer. But the question that I had was about, kind of exploring this whole theme further, because what I believe is that this has got this whole idea of social construction of who is the right kind of immigrant. It's hugely important because it's impacting people's well-being. It's kind of feels right to think that the European immigrant is seen as this a good economic actor. This person will be a good economic actor in the scheme of things, but then there is this racialized immigrant, and Indians are seen as that, who are seemingly a burden. And I think this whole backlog that is happening with respect to the immigration of the Indian students is a huge testament to that. And so I think it's kind of worth doing this research, because this is that intersection of psychology, anthropology, and also policy studies. So I'll really love to follow up on that. And I think maybe the reflection on the lived experiences, maybe a bit of reflection on how diaspora is thinking, we can take it there. Yeah.
Thank you, Najib, for great questions. And I'm so happy to see the participants said, like, I will follow up with you. I will love the gala, etc. Because that the ultimate aims of the Research in Focus event, that to foster the dialogue, to develop the collaboration. And so next one, please. Ref, I see your hand. You have questions for our speakers.
Thank you both, Jennifer and Afarin, for your presentations. I appreciate both. So I got a question for each of you. So for Afarin, what theoretical orientation or what theory did you use when you started interpreting your research data? So that's the question that then I'll move on to the next one, please.
The methodology that we used was narrative inquiry for analyzing the data, and then we use as discourse analysis. For the theoretical part, depends on the paper. Like, for example, if the theme was about like masculinity or multiculturalism, we use a theory like differently for each paper. But the methodology was narrative inquiry.
Thank you. So it was like based on the movie or the series, you picked the theoretical orientation. Yes. Or the theory that sort of fit. Thank you very much. And Jennifer, thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I mean, like you can tell, English is not my first language, so I'm an immigrant. So I really appreciate the fact that you highlighted whiteness proximity. So proximity as a keyword there, because then as Navdeep also highlighted, then there are immigrants, but it really also does matter where that immigrant's coming to Canada from. So I really appreciate you sort of like emphasizing that proximity there. And if you could share a bit more on that side, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think this goes together, and I'll wrap it up quickly so that we're not going beyond our time. But so the SSAF, I actually received that funding for I had a previous project on whiteness. So I was asking white folks what it felt like to be white. But this comes on the back of 10 years, a decade, 14 years, sorry, 12 years of my doing research in migration. And what I realized is I always looked at host community belonging. And what I realized finally, that I was really looking at whiteness. And so I did that ethnographic research last. So I published a book in early 2025 called Abiding Whiteness. And since that time, and of course, anything that's come just before then, I've been looking at whiteness, and it's just to help us understand, again, not help us understand because we already know it's there, but to kind of put that finer point on the idea that there are hierarchies, or racial status quo, and the hierarchies that exist within, on top of this kind of migration and immigration and settlement and integration framework. And so I am finding that still the Ukrainian diaspora and settlement in Edmonton was unique. Again, it was vociferous, like it was unprecedented what happened in Edmonton, particularly in Edmonton. And I want to acknowledge that Teresa's very right that, many newcomers, in the past, whether it's from largely, can be from European countries, but what would be known in the past as Eastern European countries, they were not always seen. There was gradations of white as well. And so I guess the point of this current research is to demonstrate the ways in which that idea of whiteness changes and shifts over time. And that following this large scale event, the reaction and response, the racial awakening of many white individuals after the murder of George Floyd, encapsulated still our understanding of what multiculturalism means today, and that there are certain migrants who are seen to better belong than others. So exactly what we've all been talking about here. So thank you very much. Yeah. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you both. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Lee. Thank you. Wonderful pieces of research.
Yeah, we have
Looking
3 more
forward to the
minutes.
next.
Anyone and have any other questions to share with our speakers?
Oh, yeah. I think it's good time to finalize this. I'll just follow up on that. Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much, Afarin and Jennifer, for your time and sharing your wonderful projects. I'm really interested in migrants, but I'm not in that aspect of whiteness and settlement. I am more in international student life experience, another group of migrants who have different positions, like they come here for a purpose, they come here for specific times. So your presentation about also immigrants groups, but it is a very different aspect. So I really love that, and I would love to learn more about your projects when you have the publication out. Thank you everyone for coming and joining our section today. Wish you have a wonderful day ahead. Bye bye everyone.